I don't directly associate
Age
with man
meaning.
at all. Now, there is a minimum, like 1, 2, 3 years old, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. After 13 and up, depending on your maturity in your mental maturity, your spiritual maturity, and your emotional maturity, that's when you can, in my perspective, start being assigned the crown of man. I do not assign the crown of man to everyone just because they're of age. Because if that's the case, I can assign it to a female. Because we all, if we don't die, get of age. So that's something that naturally happens. That isn't anything that has to be forced. That isn't anything that you have to put forth effort to do. But my perspective is, once again, comes from the Bible, because I believe in God, or the Bible. So he said, when I became a man, I put away my childish things. So I directly associate manhood with mentality, because age, to me, is a common denominator for everybody. And if we're going to say that, then we all grow up to be men. And I know that's not the case.
Okay. I like that. Miss Kathy said, so you all are saying if they are over 18, they are a man versus the mature level.
No. So again, the age is not directly linked to one's maturity or to one's manhood. It's their mentality, their mindset, their where they're at spiritually, emotionally. Those are the things that make up what could be considered to be man.
And that's the problem. The problem that we have is the fact that we automatically give the crown of manhood to people for age. But let's think about it. Who can stop themselves from growing older outside of death? Nobody, right? So age is something that creeps upon you every single day. So to say that manhood is automatic for everyone who reaches a certain age is belittling the status of manhood. Because we all can agree that manhood and adolescence is different, right? The concept of manhood holds a certain set of characteristics that someone who is adolescent doesn't hold, right? Mm-hmm. So to say that age automatically pushes someone up to these standards without any force or mental conditioning or training or different outlook on life, it's kind of like downplaying the crown of manhood.
And to that point, so as far as the downplaying, so a man who has put in the time and the effort to mature and to grow spiritually, emotionally, mentally, whatever the case is, who's actually decided to look within himself to mature, you're putting him on the same level as someone who ain't done nothing. like that
just because he grew older, he didn't change the way he think, he didn't change his actions, he didn't change anything about him, but since he grows older, he automatically lines up with someone who meets the other characteristics.
Right.
So that's a problem.
Right. So that's why we can't directly link age with maturity.
Because age is something that everyone is subject to. But everyone is not subject to that internal growth that can now be crowned with manhood. And that's the problem that a lot of people have when we're looking at people and we're trying to figure out, well, why did he do this? Like, we use terms like, you supposed to be a grown man. That statement within itself lets you know that there's contradiction somewhere. Because that means this individual has performed some action to where it contradicts your core definition of man. That's why you use the term "you supposed to be." That means you're acting outside of the crown of manhood and acting like something different. Because if that's the case, you wouldn't say anything. You would be like, oh, that's a man. Apparently, we have some conflict whenever certain actions are taken on the individual male's behalf that contradicts our core beliefs of manhood. Because we have statements like, you're supposed to be a man.
Yeah.
And people get frustrated when we see older people doing certain things because we automatically have assigned manhood to someone who clearly hasn't reached it yet. And that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, especially with the female to the male ratio in a relationship. They are projecting the fact that, oh, well, he's 30, so he's mature. He's a man. But then when he start dogging you out, disrespecting you, having sex with all these other people, just doing everything that you dealt with in high school, you're frustrated now because in your mind you thought you were dealing with a man, but you're really dealing with someone who hasn't grew into manhood yet.
So when do you mature? If there's not a age to like kind of pinpoint. So what's the time frame or the phase in that young male's life when he matures?
So I have one question before I want to turn this to you. So can we agree before moving forward that as a whole we need to remove the age factor outside of, a baby, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old? We don't call Noah a man because he's not. Because he's still getting into that level. So, but can we all agree collectively, at least just for the sake of conversation, that age needs to be removed from the determining factor of assigning the crown of man to a male?
I mean, I can take the age, but I'm just asking.
Okay,
you know.
Since age is not a factor, how do we determine it?
Right. So that's why I was just like, what about the phase? Maybe in this young male's life, will he,
thank you.
Reach maturity?
So I have a question.
As Kathy said, right.
Thank you, Miss Kathy.
So we need to get Kathy a shirt.
Yeah.
So we met for the first time last year, right? When we became trainers.
Mm-hmm.
And last year I was 23. Now, you did mention early in the video, even though at this point it might have changed, but early in the video you suggested once a man reaches about 30, he can be considered a man, right? But when you met me last year, either before or after you knew my age, did you view me as a man?
Yeah.
So what was it about me that displayed qualities of what you consider to be a man?
Prior to knowing his age.
Just how he carried himself, his conversation, what he talked about, his likes and dislikes. I guess associated that with this is a man.
That's it.
So to answer the question is, well, what was your question like as far as what's the timeline or when can someone? What's the phase? So to me, I feel like it's subjective or it just depends on the person. Me, I decided early on in my life that I was devoted to individual growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth, whatever the case is. So at an early age, I was able to mature into what most people would identify to be man or to have manhood. So there is no specific, everybody is different. Like, even though I developed early, Adrian might not have. You know?
I was 24. I was 24 when I decided to become a man.
Yeah, and I've been doing this. I've been deciding to grow since 17, 18. Like, I remember back in high school, me and the people that I hung around, that's all we were interested in, was growing spiritually and gaining knowledge and stuff like that. So it really just depends on the person and when they decide that they're ready to enter into that next phase.
Which is a decision. So there's not like a phase that we can assign as a common denominator. So we can't attach the age 30 to everybody, because I know plenty of 30-year-olds that's still doing the same stuff that I was doing in high school. Mm-hmm. I can recognize my childishness in my high school days. They're still living those glory days, as they call it, but they're over 30 now. I will not call them a man, because you ain't put in the work physically, spiritually, mentally, or emotionally to get to where I'm at. So I'm not going to give you that title. I'll call you a male or a boy or my guy at best, but we have to get to the point to where we're separating manhood. And that'll actually alleviate a lot of stress that people deal with trying to figure out why people are acting the way they're acting. Because you associate childishness with adolescence. But since we are attaching age, you're now struggling with the fact that, well, dang, you 35. You supposed to be doing such and such. We get that supposed to from the fact that, like you named so easily, you saw those qualities in Aaron. Mm-hmm. So when we asked you what made people a man, you went to a go-to answer, which was age. But now that we get down to it, you like, well, dang, I didn't even know your age, but I seen this. That's a man. That's the version we need the rest of the world to know. Because the rest of the world is kind of like the perspective you came from. Like, oh, well, if you're a certain age, I'm going to call you a man. But people who are being called man, but not distributing or portraying those characteristics, there's no reason for me to reach manhood because you're already giving it to me. See what I'm saying? And then we're telling young boys that, hey, you need to be a man. But if I'm a young boy being told to be a man, but what you're calling man looks exactly like me, then what do I have to do?
Yeah.
Like, where else do I have to go? I've arrived already. So if my high school days, I was a boy. But I just told you I have 30-year-olds doing the same stuff that I was doing in high school. There's no need of telling me to be a man because what you're calling a man looks just like me already. So now I think that I'm a man. So now I keep growing in age, but I'm not growing in all the other areas that I need to grow in. But you've already given me that title.